Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So, hi everybody, welcome and thank you for coming. We're going to do a quick presentation on the perfect NBAR for a perfect week. So, firstly, what is an NBAR? So, you've probably heard that term NBAR. It goes by different names as well. So, we've got the discharge needs-based assessment referral form in its entirety. So, it might be called an NBA or an NBAF. But ultimately, this is an assessment based on the needs for discharge. So, it's strength-based, it's patient-centered, excuse me, and it describes the need or the risks around discharge. So it's description, not prescription. You don't need to worry about making a plan or having the answers because that is for the adult social care team. They will confirm the discharge plan to enable that discharge. Also, an NBAR shouldn't be for a social worker allocation for discharge destination. That's something else. So all you're doing is describing that person's needs. So, who does them? Usually it's therapy led because therapists are very good at assessing somebody's function with regards to their conditions, their environment, and their sort of like clinical need. But it's crucial that we have other contributors as well. So we want doctors, nurses, allied health professionals. We want everybody's expertise to make this a really good NBAR. An NBAR would be sent around 48 hours prior to the individual being medically optimized for the discharge so that we're almost ready. We've got everything all lined up, ready to go. And it's sent when there is an identified new or additional care need for discharge. Then what will happen is the discharge to assess process will enable that person to be reassessed in the community once they're settled, once they're out of hospital. So these needs, what we're describing now, are for discharge. And then at a later date, that will be reassessed. So we're talking about this new or identified care need. What is that? What does that extra support look like? So whilst we're care planning, we're considering, is there actually an existing package of care? Is it that the patient lives with family? Can they help? What tasks can they do? Can they shop? Can they cook for the patient? Can they help them with their medications or get washed and dressed? Is it that the person, when they go home, has some goals to get back to their baseline? Do they need some rehabilitation at home? And would that be for short or long term? And what are those goals? Are they SMART? I'm sure we've all heard of SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And can we describe what those are? Is there any equipment that's needed? If so, does it need to be in for discharge? Has it already been ordered? Is the environment suitable? Will it fit? And how are we going to get it in there? Is there anybody that can let us in? Or is there a key safe? What about if we feel as though the therapy that the person needs can't really be delivered in the home? It needs to be more intensive. So at this point, that would be picked up in your description, and the discharge team and the assessors would look at a no choice policy, which means that across NWL, the beds would be looked at, which can provide the intermediate care, and that patient would go to one of those beds. At this point, we'd need to think about the patient's weight, a very specific one, but that's because in rehab, the patient will be probably needing equipment. We'll need to make sure that that equipment is suitable and it's got for example, hoists or bariatric beds or chairs. They all have weight limits with them. Is that person going to be safe in a side room on their own? Are they going to be getting up and wandering? Are they going to be falling out of bed? Are they okay to be left there for a while on their own? And also, what's the plan going forward? What are we thinking? If we feel that the person's very high risk for going home, why is that? What behaviours is that person displaying that makes you think that home wouldn't be an option? Describe it. If they have a one-to-one with them, why? Is it because they're wandering? Is it because they're very confused? Are they delirious? And what is the cause? And what's the sort of medical prognosis for this. Does the person have the mental capacity to make decisions around whether they want to go home? What does that patient want to do? What are the main barriers and risks to them returning home if we're worried about that? So description. How do you actually do an NBAR? Well, once you've opened up your patient's notes, you'll see at the top here, number 1, you click on ad hoc. That'll pull open a little menu down the side and you choose discharge forms. Funnily enough, you'll then choose discharge needs-based assessment and then finally record. So that will take you to a proforma, which looks like this image here. It's a form to fill out and it's got lots and lots of different categories. I'm going to give you an example of what it looks like. This is only just a snapshot. And this is an NBAR that was filled in that I think is quite poor. I don't think that this is a good example. I don't think this is the perfect NBAR. Can anybody give me any ideas as to why or what's missing? You can just feel free to shout out. Ollie?
The current baseline of patient is not specific.
Correct.
Sorry,
there's
sorry, I
nothing
was
very
on mute.
specific in here. There's nothing very specific in the baseline yet. Well done. Oops.
There's no detail
sorry.
at all on any of the boxes. Just one word here and there.
Yeah. Okay. That's basically it. Yeah, you've identified it. There's just really nothing in here. It doesn't really give us any information. So can you see here, this is one that I found, which I think is a good one. Okay, so we've got lots of information there. Medication, is there a care need? Yes. What? Well, the patient has a DOSIT box. It requires prompting to remember to take his medications. He'll need assistance with ordering repeat prescriptions and collecting them from the pharmacy. Self-care, washing and dressing. He used to have a shower, which was over the bath, and he was independent. Now, he requires prompting for remembering the items and actually planning and sequencing. He's got slightly reduced balance, so he dresses his lower body in sitting. And he has assistance with zips and buttons. Okay, so you can see there's quite a big difference there. And whilst we're not actually saying what we think should happen, we're describing what that patient's needs are and the complexities. Okay. So coming back to the bottom image here, once you've completed your form and everything's been ticked off, there are 2 tabs just to draw your attention to point number 6 here. So you've got the overview and the detail. And once those are completed and the system's happy, those little red asterisks that you can just about see there in the circle will disappear and you can tick, green tick, which will submit the form. So the journey of the NBAR, we start with the discharge coordination. That's all in progress. 48 hours prior to the anticipated discharge date, we complete that NBAR. Discharge coordinators on the ward will then notify the discharge hub once it's completed by all of the MDT. And it will go to be screened and reviewed. And it will be processed to the relevant commissioning authority. The integrated discharge team will follow through and confirm that discharge plan and pathway and look at all that information that you've sent, weigh up the risks. That's why they need lots and lots of meat on the bones. That's why they need lots of information to be able to look at that and say, okay, where are we going forward with this patient? So a good NBAR checklist would be the reasons they were admitted and their diagnosis. We see an awful lot of NBARs which are just copied and pasted. And it's including a lot of information, but sometimes that's out of date. Sometimes it's not relevant. It doesn't describe to us what the clinical need is. It tells us about why they've come into hospital, but that's not relevant. Equipment details, risk assessments, pre-referral equipment ordering, SMART goals, as we discussed, Do you think that they've got that's normally where we get the therapists involved and they can help us ascertaining what goals we can work towards? Care summary. Care plans for community handover. What are we thinking for moving on into the community? Has the person got capacity and have they consented to this? Risks that have been identified and how we might mitigate them. Got equipment in there twice, apologies, and cognition and communication. So we want to describe how that person communicates, describe any issues that they have with their cognitive function. Okay, and that's the end of this presentation. So I hope you all have a perfect weekend after this perfect week, and I welcome any questions or comments. Thanks, guys. Yes, Arthur.
Good afternoon, Nina. So thank you for your presentation. Just a question, because obviously from my point of view, I'm slightly in a different situation to, I think, most of my colleagues. I think, for example, Shri on Fred Salmon North, because I'm in an emergency surgical assessment unit. So some of our therapy colleagues do complete the NBARs. So obviously on one of your slides, you say it needs to be done 48 hours prior. But obviously being an assessment unit, sometimes from our point of view, where someone might need some help and support in the community, 48 hours prior for us is unrealistic, because from our point of view, obviously it's about in terms of patient flow, etc. Because some of I'm referring, I think, more for I think some of our orthopedic patients, because sometimes I've seen the orthopedic physios completing NBARs. But obviously, I think on one of your slides, you say it must be done 48 hours prior, because most of our orthopedic patients come in as day cases. And then obviously post-op, if there is an indication for review by the therapist, then sometimes in order to facilitate discharge, an NBAR is done. So how does that sit in terms, you know, so is that rigid in terms of that time frame, 48 hours prior for assessment units?
At least 48 hours prior. But I'm going to come to Natasha. She's the expert with this. So I'm going to ask her to step in a minute. But this is where I believe that if we are describing, again, we're not prescribing. So we're not too worried about what route is going to be provided or which pathway this patient is going to go down. But if we're describing those needs in great detail, accurately enough, then there are things that can happen a lot quicker than 48 hours. Natasha, are you all right to step in and give a bit more detail?
Yeah, thank you. I suppose it's more to focus on when the patient is going to be medically ready. So the idea of 48 hours was before they're medically optimized. So at their opportune moment where they've done as much as they can do in their therapy, not much is really going to change in terms of their function, etc. That we're just giving our commissioning authorities additional time to be able to facilitate whatever that care plan might look like. So if you've got elective patients coming in, most of the time you're probably not going to need big complex packages of care to be arranged for them for discharge. That's probably why you wouldn't need to. But even things like your district nursing referrals, often they require 48 hours notice, and it's more just to manage their own capacity in the community. So that earlier that we're planning, that's the biggest ask really, is thinking about when the patient's going to be medically ready to leave and what they're going to need in order to be able to help them leave at that time, really. So it's just kind of proactively pre-planning and thinking ahead. I think we've lost Lisa as well, Nina, as well, haven't we?
Oh, or maybe she'll be able to jump back on. Thanks so much. Victor, you've got your hand up.
Hello.
Hi.
We have a question about the prescription and description. A lot of us have been doing prescription because we've been seeing the patients for a long period of time. So we recommend a certain amount of care. We put what we feel will benefit the patient in the community. Obviously, that saves you a lot of time in the screening process as well. You have an idea of what the patient might benefit from. Do you still want us to carry on prescribing or just description?
I think what we're really looking for, and this training is all about, is getting a really, really good understanding of what the needs are. So if you feel like you've got some recommendations, particularly as therapists, and you going forward would, you know, be sort of foreseeing which pathway that patient needs, I guess that I don't think you'd be penalized for putting that information down and saying what your thoughts are. But ultimately what we're asking for is that as much information is there so that the clinical screeners, who probably will be in agreement with you because you're all very expert, will be able to make those decisions, because there are other people that may fill in NBARs, or it might be that there are other patients where it's not clear for. So my thoughts would be to kind of include your thoughts, but then all we're really looking for is all of that information. So I think Natasha's got a hand up because she's going to come in for that question. So do you want to go first, and then we'll go to Ollie?
Thank you. Yeah, it was exactly like you said, Nina, and we're not asking you to change anything in terms of what you're doing in your recommendations for care. It's just, instead of saying something on an NBAR like 3 times a day package of care call and then leaving it at that, it's actually describing what them 3 care calls a day are going to provide for that patient in terms of what you're doing on the wards currently. So it's just a different way of thinking about the information that you're inputting into that referral. You're hopefully still going to get the same outcome. It's just you're backing up a rationale and reasons as to what that patient can do, opposed to just saying, please can I just have a 3 times a day package of care? Does that kind of make more sense? Hopefully. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly that. We do see NBARs come through, and obviously because I am part of the homeless pathway team, we see NBARs coming through. What's it for discharge destination, please? And then there's no other information on it. So it's just that, you know, let's yes, absolutely, we can start to think about discharge destination, but what exactly is it that the patient needs? So Ollie?
Hello. I was just going to ask, because sometimes there's confusion, when is it appropriate to edit an NBAR or send a new one, updated one, so to speak?
We shouldn't have to, because unless the person has functionally or clinically changed, because if we are originally thinking, I think that this person is going to be able to go home, and then, you know, the family are not happy or whatever, with the family are wanting to go to a nursing home, we wouldn't, because we're not prescribing, we wouldn't say we're going to send a new NBAR this time because we want a nursing home, please. So because you've described, if you've done it properly, all of those needs, the clinical needs, the functional needs, how that person is managing with their incontinence, for example, communication, how they're managing with their everyday activities, that should be enough. It shouldn't, unless the person specifically, you know, drastically changes, significantly changes, then that can be reviewed and updated.
Thanks.
Does that make sense? Thank you for your question. Anybody else? Hi, Natasha.
I didn't have a question. I was just going to add on to that last point. If we do have any pushback from the referral process when it gets clinically reviewed before it being sent on to the community partners, and in where you're being asked to update NBARs, please do flag this with our service managers, because we want to try and move away from this request. Like Nina said, we shouldn't be updating the NBARs unless it's because the information is lacking and we're not able to process it because it's not clear enough. That's the only reason that we should be adding additional detail. It shouldn't be a reason of a delay in terms of that process, and we certainly shouldn't be sending them back to the clinical teams on the ward to change a date. For example, if a patient has gone not medically fit because of bloods from one day and then the following day they're medically fit, please don't feel that you have to update a whole new NBAR or change a date. That is something that we can facilitate through the transfer of care hub, and we shouldn't be asking clinicians to do that. So if that does happen, please do flag it to the service managers across the team so we can pick it up and address it, because we're just trying to help you rather than make it more challenging and extra workload.
Thank you. Any more for any more? Nope. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. If you do have any questions, just feel free to email me, nina.tissington@nhs.net, and have